good morning, good morning. It is Wednesday, January 6th, 2021. Welcome to Empty with K. Raz. Today's show is brought to you by Midtown ABC, opening soon in Lake Carolina and Solar Station. It is the spirit of Midtown. As usual, I do not own the rights to the background music. I just like the music. Interesting fact today. According to the USDA, foreign investors own at least 28.3 million acres of U.S. farmland. That area is about the size of Ohio. Wow. Today's theme: why was Black Wall Street so successful and why hasn't it been duplicated? Like many of you, when I was in school, I had no idea of Black Wall Street. Really, be honest, maybe 3 years ago is when I learned, maybe 4 years ago, about Black Wall Street. Well, there were a couple Black Wall Streets. One was in Durham, North Carolina, and one was in Tulsa, Oklahoma. The one in Tulsa, Oklahoma, of course, was the larger of the two areas. It was more of a strip type area in Durham, but the Greenwood district, which is what its technical name was, Black Wall Street was over 35 blocks, 35 city blocks, and that was the business area. There were several areas that housed housing and farms and things like that, but the core of the Greenwood district was the 35 blocks of businesses, and that included everything from doctor's offices to grocery stores, restaurants, ophthalmologists, you name it, it was there. Banks, insurance companies, whatever you needed was there. So how, during that time, did an area flourish with just blacks when there was prejudice, there was racism aimed directly at blacks? How did they prosper? How was that possible with the limited amount of resources that blacks had at that time? Well, in 1905, which is when that area was really established as the Greenwood District, it was started out of necessity because blacks weren't allowed in a lot of stores. They weren't paid well for the work that they were doing. And so it was, okay, we're going to be segregated. Okay, let's segregate and let's take care of each other. So that mindset of taking care of each other, not worrying about being a part of quote unquote mainstream came about. And so, of course, it started with a couple of men that were there. And, of course, one man, he originally bought the majority of that land and wanted to start a society where blacks were able to take care of each other. And it began to work. And it began to work. And for blacks who didn't want to go through all of the meaning things they had to go through to get groceries and clothes and that type of thing, this became an awesome feeling to go where you were liked, loved, and you didn't mind spending your money there. well, the area began to grow, working together. It was the finest in education for blacks. It had the best educational system in the country for blacks. At the time of quote unquote Black Wall Street, in that particular area, they were paid more than our minimum wage is now. Imagine that. That's how prosperous the area became. One of the famous things they talk about Black Wall Street is when it really got to its height. At that time, Oklahoma only had 2 airports, and 6 black families in Black Wall Street in the Greenwood district owned their own planes. The businesses there were so prosperous that they had neighboring white men that worked for them. But of course, prejudice and jealousy began to start creeping in. Even though this was widely successful with the blacks that were there, most came from Mississippi and Georgia and Texas, that type of thing. I'm from South Carolina, so it was very few from South Carolina that migrated there, but there were some. The whites that worked for the blacks that were owners of plants, like there was a printing plant, because this place even had its own newspaper, everything, hospital, you name it, it was there, and every business did well. So the whites that worked for them, in particular the plant, one white gentleman got angry because of his jealousy and taking orders from black owners. He set the whole plant on fire. Now, at that time, they had $25,000 worth of equipment in there. Today, because of the business they were in, that equipment would be millions. Burn the plant down. And because of the jealousy of the whites that lived around the area, they began to see all of the blacks in the town were becoming rich or prosperous. There were 3 men in the town who were multi-millionaires, and each layer of wealth as it went from there began to increase. So those who were worth 500,000 or 250,000 or 100,000 or 75, there were more people, more and more and more, which is obvious you go less, but there were very few who were worth less or owned less, or their net worth was less than $25,000. A significant amount of money. We're talking 1905, between 1905 and 1921. $25,000 is a lot of money. So we have to look at it almost in the realm of 10 times that amount now. Just an awesome feat for a society who had been held back because of the color of their skin. They didn't do anything. They didn't steal from anybody. They worked with the hand they were dealt. And they became extremely successful. So what happened to Black Wall Street? Well, again, racism began to creep in because of the jealousy folks saw outside of that. They began to see the talent of black people and how smart these folks really were. But not just that, how they continued to educate the generations that were coming behind them. I told you the education system in the Greenwood District historically was one of the best school systems in the history of the country in reference to blacks. So not only were they educated, they were super intelligent. They learned how to be self-sufficient. And you gotta know, if someone is trying to hold you down or hold you back, you being self-sufficient is not something they planned on. So one day in May, the Tulsa riots happened, and it happened because there was a white woman who was there, and the elevator bellhop was accused of raping the woman. Now, of course, many different accounts of that happened, was said, but at any rate, at the very least, there should have been an arrest. There should have been, evidence, trial, all of this stuff. Well, of course, how it was then, they allowed, whites to handle it, come in from outside of Greenwood to handle it. The mobs would gather. The police actually would deputize some of the white men who wanted justice. So black men from the Greenwood District would go to try to stop the mobs outside of the Greenwood District to try to preserve their area, because they're already thinking they're going to try to destroy everything. But they were so outnumbered, all they could do was retreat back. But those riots resulted in those 35 blocks being burnt to the ground. Several people died, several people injured. No whites were shot, no whites were injured. No one went to jail. Severely destroyed. Entire lifestyle. At the time, 1921, the Greenwood District had grown to over 100,000 people. Think about how prosperous that is for a place that's only technically 35 blocks of business, industry, education, medical, destroyed. Now, it says only 9,000 people were left homeless because of that. But a whole society was crippled. Their whole infrastructure was gone. That's like most downtowns exploding, where your courthouse and everything that you use to manage and control your town is all of a sudden gone. So, 1940, they rebuilt Black Wall Street, but it was never the same. So a lot of whites came in, and they knew blacks were desperate, and so they, offered them pennies for their land and things like that. So it never really grew again. But the reason why Black Wall Street has never resurfaced, I would think because now society has changed, or should have changed. Yes and no has changed, but we're allowed now to be educated wherever we want, work wherever we want, live wherever we want, drive whatever we want, go to whatever hospital we want. eat wherever we want. And I think the idea of having those segregated societies have been diluted because it's America. And we should be able to go wherever we want, do whatever we want. At that time, we couldn't do that. And I think that's more of why Black Wall Street grew. That's why it became so self-sufficient, because that was all they had. That's all they could go to. And the respect for to be a man or a woman was there. So I believe each culture has its thing to where it's just their culture that spends time and get together. But as a society in the U.S., do we really want to just have a Black Wall Street? Wouldn't that be moving more toward being segregated in a country that shouldn't have segregation? I mean, racism is real. I get that part. But I don't think now we can blame the fact of not having a Black Wall Street why so many of us are not successful, or not educated, are not progressive. We have the opportunity to do that as a whole. And I think we have the opportunity to celebrate every culture that is within our society. But I think when we start now thinking about perhaps we should be segregated, I think it's pretty much a problem there. I don't know if that's what we should be doing, but I'm not the know-all, the be-all. But speaking in terms of a Black Wall Street, I don't know that we need another Black Wall Street. Maybe the idea of a Black Wall Street and keeping things within our community, the black dollar in Wall Street, Black Wall Street at that time, lasted in that neighborhood nearly a year. It circulated at a minimum 36 times. That's what we need in our neighborhoods. That's what we need in our smaller cultures, is to facilitate those dollars more and more. Interesting quote. Prejudice is the child of ignorance. William Hazlitt. Next show, our education system. Should be interesting, right? We'll be back here tomorrow taking another didactic look at living life empty, or living life until empty. Until next time.